The US says it doesn't have high expectations for peace talks, which are due to be held between Ukraine and Russia in Turkey, and asserted that Donald Trump and the Russian President Vladimir Putin needed to meet in order to make progress. Ukraine's President Zelensky is in Turkey. He says he is still ready for peace talks, but has accused President Putin of not being serious about the process. In a minute, we'll hear from Sarah Smith, who's travelling with President Trump. First, our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg sent this report from Istanbul.
It's the city where East meets West. But in Istanbul, would Russia meet Ukraine? All day we waited and waited outside a palace for what would be the first direct peace talks between Moscow and Kiev in 3 years. If they happen. They didn't today, maybe tomorrow.
Right now, the only thing that's clear is that nothing is clear. We don't know what time these talks are going to start and whether they're going to start at all.
President Zelensky was in Ankara.
Do you have a message for Vladimir Putin?
I'm here. I think this is very clear message.
He met President Erdogan and said Ukraine's delegation would travel to Istanbul for the talks. But he won't go unless Vladimir Putin does. He wasn't optimistic. Russia, he said, doesn't feel it needs to end the war. President Putin has sent a comparatively low-level delegation to Istanbul. His supporters defended that.
Mr. Putin proposed to sit around the table and he proposed to organize direct dialogue between Russia and Ukraine.
But Mr. Putin is not here, and Mr. Zelensky is.
Why he should be here?
Donald Trump says he's not surprised by Vladimir Putin's no-show.
Look, nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together, okay? And obviously he wasn't going to go. He was going to go, but he thought I was going to go. He wasn't going if I wasn't there.
But could President Putin still fly in? On a Kremlin conference call, I asked his spokesman, did he exclude the possibility? We need to see how these talks go first, Dmitry Peskov said. Then everyone will do their best to secure the best result. Later, the head of the Russian delegation in Istanbul claimed that Moscow sought lasting peace. But tonight, there is little expectation that the talks, if they happen, will bring peace in Ukraine any closer. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Istanbul.
Well, President Trump, still on a tour of the Middle East, had suggested that he could travel to Istanbul to participate in the meeting if a deal was on the table. He's now in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, is travelling with him. So, Sarah, do you get any sense tonight that President Trump might head to Istanbul?
I would say this evening it seems very unlikely, because we do hear from Donald Trump all the time about how eager he is to end the war in Ukraine and how much he wanted these talks to take place. And he had suggested earlier in the week that he might go on to Istanbul if he thought his presence would be helpful. But then, as you heard there, when he was on Air Force One flying here to Abu Dhabi, he said, well, he'd never believed that President Putin was going to go unless he, Donald Trump, was there as well, and that nothing is going to happen with this situation until those two presidents talk to each other directly, which seems at odds with what he was telling us earlier in the week. But we heard a very similar thing from the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who's at a NATO meeting in Turkey as well. Have a listen to what he said.
We don't have high expectations of what will happen tomorrow. And frankly, at this point, I think it's abundantly clear that the only way we're going to have a breakthrough here is between President Trump and President Putin.
So he says that President Trump is willing to have these direct talks with President Putin, but not, it seems, in Istanbul. I mean, we are reasonably nearby. It's practically on the way home to the United States, but it doesn't appear like he has any plans to stop off on Turkey on his way back. He was asked about this evening, and he said that we'll be taking off tomorrow for destinations unknown. He said because we are getting calls from here and calls from there, but then he did say it was almost certainly going to be Washington, D.C. that he would be returning to. So it seems that, yeah, he's saying he's happy to talk to President Putin. In fact, that it's necessary for him to talk to President Putin about Ukraine, but it's not going to happen this week.